EastEnders can only be described as a phenomenon. It has gripped the nation for 35 years and counting, finding itself on our television screens every week since February 1985. From Mick Carter to Dirty Den, from Pat Butcher to Shirley Carter, and from Kate Oates to Julie Smith. In this series of short films, let's have a look at just how this jewel in the BBC's crown happened. After nearly a year of development, the BBC's new soap opera, EastEnders, was starting to become something far more tangible in the first few months of 1984. The BBC had just purchased ATV's Elstree Studios, now renamed to the BBC Elstree Centre, and EastEnders had a solid, greenlit and approved premise by the higher-ups at the BBC. The show was intended to be ready for January 1985, whereby cameras would have to start rolling by at the earliest October, as management had requested Smith records episodes 8 weeks in advance of broadcast. So in just 9 months, the Elstree Centre had to not only be refurbished and put into practical working order, especially as numerous health and safety problems were found, but also the world of what would become Wolford E20, or as it was here, E8, would have to be created. The Victorian square in which Smith and Holland had envisioned the setting of EastEnders was yet to be found, as it was assumed that the exterior scenes would be recorded on location, much like with Channel 4's Brookside. However, several concerns worried Smith about this. Firstly, they needed to find the perfect location, and while there were some serious contenders, most notably Facet Square in the East End borough of Hackney, a huge hospital lay on the edge of the square, and Smith didn't want to incorporate such a thing into the plots of the episodes, feeling like she'd be treading over too similar ground as Angels. Also, Smith was concerned with filming in the real East End, as she didn't think the locals would take kindly to a film crew showing up all the time, and them having to bribe them not to repaint the houses or change the curtains, not to mention any potential problems with gangs and the youth of the area. However, things started to clear, as the esteemed designer, Keith Harris, joined the EastEnders production team, and he suggested they use the lot. The lot was essentially a scruffy wasteland turned rubbish tip, which had once been used to house large exterior sets for ATV's old productions. It was covered in sand when Smith, Holland and Harris found themselves there in early 1984, left over from the last production to use the lot back in 1982. Although it didn't look much, Harris began drawing in the sand with Smith the outline of what would become Albert Square. The new home to the East End would be coming from the middle of a rubbish tip in Hertfordshire, and Harris had only a matter of months to get it made. This wasn't going to be easy, as EastEnders was intended to be a cheap show by the BBC, and building a full-sized area of London's East End was not going to be cheap. While it would have been no problem if they'd known the show would be still going on 35 years later, they didn't even know if it would last at least 1 year by this point, so by the time Harris had persuaded the BBC to actually invest in such a large exterior set, it was only given the life expectancy of around 15 years, after which it would start falling apart. But surely it wouldn't go on that long. Throughout this time, Jonathan Powell stood right behind Smith and Holland, as EastEnders began to come together, despite the unexpected costs. However, the BBC were having to deal with a crisis of their own. As is common with the BBC, being a public broadcaster, the free market, Thatcherite and conservative worldview has never really gelled with it. And in 1984, the management of the BBC found themselves wrapped up in the Peacock Committee, a government investigation into how the BBC was ran and funded. And this therefore meant the Sixth Floor put a heavy amount of pressure on Powell to make sure EastEnders was something which the licence fee payer actually wanted. And not only that, but it had to, for the sake of the BBC, be a runaway success. Deadlines were starting to build up on Smith and Holland by March. As the square was being constructed, the costume department were gearing up, and the casting people had even begun looking at actors, but there was still no show or characters. There was a single piece of paper which gave an outline of what EastEnders was going to be about, but this was still months later after it had been written, and that was all they had. So Smith and Holland decided to depart on a 2-week holiday to Lanzarote, where they had one sole purpose: to create a whole new world of people, characters and places. Struggling for inspiration when they got there, the two of them took from Holland's own life to invent their first character, as he was from the East End. His mother, Ethel, was one of 4 sisters, and her eldest sister Lou had married a man, Albert Beale, and became, you guessed it, Lou Beale. In fact, he had cousins called Peter and Pauline as well, all of which would end up going into making the Beale and Fowler extended family. So, Lou Beale was the first character created, described originally as a lively 70-year-old who can be a cruel old bag, but it's always her house which finds the place for big family celebrations. Again, taking inspiration from Holland's family, the second character created was Ethel Skinner, another older character and a friend for Lou. They then continued creating more characters, the local doctor, Harold Legg, and then onto Lou's twin children, Pauline Fowler and Peter Beale. Interestingly here, over 2 years before Pam St. Clement took to the screens as the iconic Pat Butcher, the character was first mentioned. Next was Pauline's husband, Arthur Fowler, and then their children, Mark and Michelle, who would make up the first part of the young cast, who would keep the children and teenagers engaged in the show, making it for all ages, which was very important. Pete's wife came next, Kathy Beale, along with their son, Ian, who was described as a chip of the old block who might cause a bit of trouble in the future. With the Beale and Fowler extended family completed, who many of the main storylines would hang on, the two of them began work on the other characters, including Mary the Punk, Syed and Namja, providing Bangladeshi representation to truly show the diversity of the modern East End. Similarly, Alan and Kevin Carpenter were next conceived, as well as Chris and Sue Osmond, although Chris would later become Ali. Throughout the 2 weeks they continued with Lofty, Debbie and Andy, and then, once all that was done, their final family, the Watts, the occupants of the local public house. Jack, Pearl and Tracy, as they were then known. Straight away, ideas such as Jack and Pearl's unstable relationship and affair with his mistress, as well as Tracy's adoption, were on paper. After all of this, 23 characters had been created for the soap opera, and from here, the two continued to come up with ideas for these characters, more backstories and existing relationships between each other. Within these 2 weeks, Smith and Holland did not only create 23 characters, but they went on to plan potential storylines, most of which came to pass, for the following 3 years of the show, as well as writing a detailed breakdown of episodes 1 and 2, forming a 2-part pilot. It would focus around the death of long-time resident of the square, Reg Cox, and almost act as a murder mystery to introduce the audience to all 23 characters. Other plots here included Pauline's pregnancy and the breaking of the news to Lou. The outlines of both of these episodes was almost beat for beat the same as what made it to the screen nearly a year later. Well, apart from one notable inclusion.